So you're working on a new pattern, maybe an upcycle, and you need to put in a separating zipper. Well, that's easy, but it has a lining. How do you put in a separating zipper with a lining? Well, it's a little more difficult, and there's some different steps to putting it in. And this is a completely different process than a regular zipper with a lining or an invisible zipper with a lining. You might think it's the same, but it's not. Today, we're gonna go over all the steps you're gonna need to successfully put in a separating zipper with a lining. So follow along to the end so I can give you all my little tips and tricks to putting this in the easiest way. Real quick, before we start, if you want to learn more about sewing, make sure you check out my online sewing classes and the sewing club. There's going to be a link down below in the description. And if you're really enjoying Sewing Anastasia, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel a lot. Now let's get back to putting in this separating zipper. I'm going to demo this technique on a jacket that I'm working on right now. And if you're working on an upcycle, make sure you separate your lining from your self fabric and make sure your zipper is separate. This process is going to be the same whether it's an upcycle or something from scratch, or a jacket or a dress or a top or whatever it is you're creating. So I have the front of my jacket here, and I want to put this really fun orange separating zipper down the front of it. And I'm going to be using this awesome chartreuse lining. And this area here is going to represent any garment that has a separating zipper. To start this, we're going to unzip our zipper and line up one side with center front. So I'm going to unzip this. And now we want our teeth to be here later, but we need to sew right sides together, and this is the right side. So we're gonna flip it, so that way the zipper tape is at the center front edge, not the teeth. It's real important that you have this zipper tape at the edge here and not the teeth. We wanna make sure that the top of the zipper is all the way up at the top of the fabric at the neck here. And we want this extra here because we need seam allowance to sew on the collar later. Or maybe you just have a finished seam here. You need some seam allowance there because you don't want to try sewing into those metal teeth or plastic teeth. So I'm just going to pin this going all the way down the jacket. I'm lining up the twill tape on the zipper with the edge of the jacket. So I'm essentially lining it up right on top of my serge. And it's real important to be exact with this process so it turns out nice and even and it doesn't look wobbly or lopsided. So we're just going to start with one side. Now that we have it all pinned, what we're going to do is run a basting stitch on the sewing machine right down the center of the twill tape. And this is going to prepare us for our next step of attaching the lining. I'm going to start at the bottom of the zipper just so I can keep everything over to the left. I have my all-purpose zipper foot on the left side, and I have my stitch length set to 5 millimeter. You can set it to 5, 6, 4, however long your sewing machine goes for lengths. I'm gonna add a little back stitch in this because I do want it to stay in place. And we're just gonna work all the way up to the top. And when you're doing this, make sure you're not pulling or stretching your fabric or your zipper. That's gonna give you a wavy zipper, and we don't want that. That's not gonna look good. I'm gonna sew all the way up to the top, just add a back stitch in there for good measure, and take out our project. Now that we have one side of the zipper in, we need to make sure that the other side ends up exactly at the same level. So I have a great tip for you. The zipper we basted in looks great. Now to line these areas up perfectly where the seam is, we want to put on the zipper. So we're gonna put on the other half of the zipper, zip it up, and then what we're going to do is take our chalk and we're going to draw a line directly across from that seam. So I know exactly where to line it up on the other side when I flip it over. So now I'm going to unzip the zipper. And we're going to flip it over to attach the other side. And now I can make sure that that chalk line is going to end up perfectly at that seam. So that way our zipper lines up. And to double check this, we can put a pin in it going vertically. I'm going to pull that down just a little. And we're going to zip it up again. And we're going to see if it lines up with the pin in it. And if it is, then we're good. If not, you want to adjust it at this point. So it looks like I need to bring mine down just a little bit. So you can see that I don't have it perfectly lined up. And it's going to be so much easier to test this out with a pin than it is a basting stitch. So I moved it up a smidge, and now I'm going to zip up the zipper again. And there we go. Now my lines are lining up perfectly, and I know that's a good position for when I sew my zipper in. So now that I know this lines up, we can unzip the zipper, and I'm going to pin the zipper down just like I did on the other side. Making sure that that zipper tape is lined up nice and close to the edge. Now we're all pinned up and ready to baste it down just like we did on the other side. I'm going to start at the top of the zipper so that way I can keep the bulk of my jacket to the outside. And again, just make sure that zipper tape stays lined up with the edge of the fabric. When that zipper pull gets in the way, just make sure you leave your needle in, lift your foot up, and zip up the zipper. And now the second side is basted. Now that we have both sides of the zipper on, it's time to attach the lining. With your jacket right side face up, we're going to take the right side of the lining and we're going to place it over the zipper. And we're going to pin all 3 layers together, lining this up. You're going to want to make sure that the lining is lining up with the edge of that zipper tape and the self of your jacket. And you're going to pin this all the way down to the bottom of the jacket. Since we're going to do the same thing on the other side of the lining, I'm going to go ahead and pin that side down too. That's right, we're going to sew both of these up the same way. So now what we need to do is sew the lining down in the same spot that we put that basting stitch. So you can either do it from the top of the lining side and your zipper foot will glide right along those teeth there, or you can flip it over and follow that basting stitch on the other side. If you're a beginner, it's going to be easiest for you to follow that existing basting stitch on the other side, but it doesn't matter whether you sew with the lining side face up or the self side. So we're going to sew all the way down to the bottom of the zipper, and I can feel that it ends right here. Yep, right there. And then what we're going to do is make a right turn and we're going to hem the bottom of the jacket as well. And I'm just going to hem it up to the center of the panel. And I'm going to stop sewing there so that way I can easily attach my other back lining piece, or maybe your back lining piece is already attached to it, then you can just sew all the way around the hem. Really depends on your project and what you're doing with this technique. Now let's go sew both sides of the zipper down the same way. So I'm going to start with the beginner method first, where I can see that basting stitch, so I kind of know where I'm following. And I'm also going to move my needle position over to the left 0.3 millimeters, so just a tad, so that way I'm just on the left of that stitch there, so we don't risk seeing that basting stitch on the outside of the garment. So I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to make sure I'm back stitching. I'm going to keep all those layers together and just work my way all the way down to the bottom. Always double check, make sure you're not getting anything caught under there. Keep everything nice and flat. I like to keep a hand in the back just to keep it flat. I'm not pulling it through, I'm letting the machine do all the work. Now I'm at the bottom of the zipper. So I'm going to come all the way down to the bottom of the zipper. I'm going to come like 2 stitches past. I'm going to leave my needle in and I'm going to turn. So we want to make sure our foot is not hitting the bottom of the zipper. Just give yourself a few extra stitches there. So that way it's a nice smooth sew. And again, I'm going to sew over to the center of the panel. Now that this side's done with the beginner method, let's do the other side with the lining face up. For this side, I'm starting with the lining face up. And again, just make sure that that foot is just right next to the teeth, and that's going to be your guide. And just keep everything lined up here at the side. You're still going to back stitch at the beginning and just work your way all the way down. Now when we get to the bottom of this one, the zipper pull is going to be in the way. So we're going to leave our needle in, lift up our foot, just pull back your lining a little bit and move the zipper pull out of the way. Now you can easily sew down to the bottom. And then again, we're going to sew right at the bottom of the zipper to hem our jacket. So you can always like come down to the bottom too, and then we can go back and make that horizontal hemline. So now we can hem it, and I want to get really close to the bottom of the zipper. So if you want, you can move your needle position over, change a foot, do what you need to do to get really close to the bottom of the zipper. You just really want to make sure you're right below the bottom of it and not on top of it, because that is a giant metal piece that your needle is not going to go through, and you don't want to ruin your sewing machine. So we're going to back stitch here because we're starting again. And now we're just going to come down to the center panel. Add a couple back stitches. And now we're done with that second side. So let's go take a look at it and talk about our next steps. So we have both sides of the lining here sewn in. Now what we need to do is cut off the extra bulk at the corners. That way we can have a nice clean corner on the jacket. And then we have one step left. So we're just going to cut off some of that bulk on the corner. We're going to do it to both sides here. And this is for when we turn it right side out. You don't have all that extra fabric building up in the corner here. So it's going to give you a nice smooth corner. This next step is really important. It's going to make sure everything lays nice and flat and that the lining and the self don't get caught in the zipper when you're zipping up and down. And so to do that, we're going to be adding a top stitch through all the layers. We're going to go through the lining layer, that zipper, and the front of the jacket. So we want to make sure everything's flat when we start. We don't want it all bubbly, so you can iron it or pull it flat and put a pin in it and make sure everything stays nice and flat while you are sewing. A top stitch is a stitch a 1/4 inch or further away from the seam. And I'm going to be stitching a 1/4 inch away from the seam where the lining attaches to the zipper. And when I'm stitching, I want to stitch from the right side of the garment. So I'm going to be using a blue thread on the top thread. And then for the bobbin, I'm going to be using a different color thread. So I'm going to wind the chartreuse color in my bobbin so that everything matches beautifully. And we're going to do the same thing on both sides. So I'm starting at the bottom just so I can keep the bulk of my fabric to the outside of my machine. I have added my 1/4 inch foot just to make this easier. If you have one, I highly suggest using it. We're going to start at the bottom. We're going to make sure our machine is moving forward real nice. And then we are going to add our back stitches. And again, while you're doing this, just double check once in a while. Make sure that lining and back is nice and flat and pulled taut. And I'm going to be sewing all the way up to the top, back stitching, and now we're done with that side. So now I'm going to do the other side, and this time I'm starting at the top, so that way I can keep the bulk of my jacket to the outside of my machine. And at some point, that zipper pull is going to get in the way, so needle in, foot up, and zip it out of the way, and it won't give you any problems. You get to the bottom, back stitch, and cut. We are done. Let's take a look at our separating zipper with a lining. Look at the inside of the jacket with the lining there and that top stitch. It looks gorgeous. And I just want to point out, if you're upcycling or you have the rest of your lining attached, you're going to want to add that top stitch going around the bottom of your jacket as well. And you can see how nice and clean and flat our zipper looks from the top. Our seams line up, the bottom of our jacket hem lines up. Everything is gorgeous. And our separating zipper works beautifully. Our lining fabric is not getting caught in that zipper because we've added that beautiful top stitch. Now that my zipper's in, I can finish the rest of my jacket. Or if you're upcycling, now you can wear your garment out. Again, this technique works on anything you're putting a separating zipper in with a lining. Today you've learned how to put in a separating zipper with a lining, how to line up any seams you might have in a garment, and how to prevent that lining from getting caught in the zipper, along with giving your project a beautiful hem right next to the bottom of that separating zipper. Now, adding separating zippers is going to be a breeze, so make sure you save this video for next time you're putting in a separating zipper. Thanks so much for watching today. If you have any questions on the process, leave it down below and I'll get back with you as soon as I can. And if you're interested in learning more about sewing, well, make sure you check out my classes in person here in Chicago or online. There's links down below. You can even join the sewing club. It is so much fun. We even have a Discord you can join. And if you're really enjoying Sewing Anastasia, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you know when the new videos come out. Really helps out the channel a lot. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching today. These videos are for you guys. And don't forget to follow my Instagram stories so you know what's going on in the studio with me and Iris. Thank you so much for watching today. Bye!